Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. This week's video is part 10 in the fangled fastback conversion build series that I've been doing. And last week I did a video showing assembly of the side pieces and welding in the tops or the header pieces that hold everything together. I stressed in that video taking measurements and making sure everything is as square as you can possibly get it. I think I covered all of the information pretty well. Now when I ended the last video, I had set the roof on and I had the rain gutters in place. And I realized something, that I made some assumptions. We all make these assumptions. We assume that the people that make these parts are trying to make them exactly the same as what came from Detroit or wherever. They try to copy these pieces, and sometimes they do a good job and sometimes they don't. So I had trouble fitting the roof on with the rain gutters in place, but my assumption was that the rain gutters were intended to go as high as I could get them against the inner structure. So I looked at the original 68 coupe that I had, and I realized that the rain gutter piece doesn't necessarily have to be flush with that inner structure. Like, it could be up or down slightly. What I ran into when I was putting the rain gutters on, and I'd put them up all the way, and then I tried to set the roof on, the roof was wanting to sit up. And I thought I must have done something really wrong, because this was all fitting really nicely before. So I took everything back apart and I did some more test fitting. I'm going to show you some of those details moving forward. I'm going to put the roof back on and set the rain gutters up in place and show you those differences that may affect how everything else fits. Always test fit, test fit, test fit. So before I put the roof back up, I want to show you how well the quarter panels are fitting against the side pieces. Nice and flush here at the overlap. Very nice. I see a little bit of a variation here, but that could be just simply the stamping. So, but this lines up really nice. This one also lines up really nice, and it also fits flush up here against the inside or against the inner structure. So all of that is looking really good. Now I want to show you something else. When I was fitting everything, I was struggling with making the roof drop into that channel for the rain gutter. And I mentioned earlier in the segments about these being possibly a little bit long. So I'm going to show you some detail on that, because it's important that you check these things. I can change this at any point. Like, if I need to cut this off after it's installed, I can still cut it off and clean it up and make it look nice. But I wanted to show you what I'm finding with the trim pieces, because this may actually be a little bit long. Also, I want to show you how the fitment goes against the flange here that creates the rain gutter. As I mentioned in the other video, this has some variation to it. Like, you can see the width here, and then it gets wider through here, and then in the front section this really does get a lot wider, and that may come into play as well. But let me set the camera up and show you this rain gutter. Now, it's a little hard to get all of this in the camera, but if I take this gutter and I put it up against, and just follow the curve, like you can see the little wear pattern here of where this is rubbing on it. And if I put this up against, I don't know how evident it is in the video, but there's a gap here because this is narrower. So this may have to get trimmed back or even change direction just a little bit. Same way at the front, as I mentioned, it has that same issue. So the other part I want to show you is the rain gutter stainless. Now, these pieces are the Corvex, I think is the name of the company. So brand new, and I'm assuming they're made to the correct length. If I put this up in place, and I will point out that it doesn't fit perfect. Like, the curves are a little bit loose or wider than they probably should be, but I'm putting this on the curve Hopefully it's in frame. Let me see if I got the camera in the right spot. Okay, so I'm putting this on the curve right here, and I come down here, and sure enough, this is short, this is short, this is long. So there may be some merit to that idea that these are made too long. So I've kept this, I have this piece on the rain gutter, and I'm going to go just move the camera around so you can see the front section. I know it's kind of hard to give you these details with a high angle like this, but that end is sitting on the gutter, and then you can look here, this plays out at a different angle. So this is going to have to be kind of rebent somewhat to make it follow the shape of this rain gutter, assuming this doesn't change whenever I put it on the car. But you know, it's just one of those things where you have to pay attention to it so you don't end up bending it or kinking it. So there is some value into the idea that the other end is a little bit long. Alright, so I'm going to put the roof panel back up on the car. I'm going to take another look at all of this stuff. As I pointed out in the previous, I pushed this up as high as I could get it, and it may actually need to come down slightly to make room for the roof and allow for adjusting. Okay, you can see that this fits very well. It's in a relaxed position. It's not really, I mean, it's got a little bit of a push up right here, but that's not dramatic. It's pretty minor. When it comes down to it, you can take a pair of vice grips and just clamp it down, and it fits. So, not that big a deal. The rain gutter, as I was talking about earlier, when I put this in before, I was trying to push this up to make it match on this inner portion of the inner structure. And you can see when I do that, it pushes the roof up, and it does it on both sides. If I don't do that, if I just let it relax, it actually fits pretty nice. Now, is there some adjustments that I can make? Like I'm going to have to play with this inner piece. I mentioned in the previous video, when you push on this part, this curve isn't big enough or small enough. I don't know however you want to look at it. So whenever I push up on this, it wants to push the roof up. And I can't have that. I have to make this fit because the roof goes on last, but you have to have this in the right spot so that when you do put the roof on, it's not fighting the situation. So I'm going to have to make some adjustments as I go and try to get this, keep this down and get this in here nice and snug. So I will probably trim down a little metal here to help push the rain gutter inboard, and then I'm going to play with the back section where the roof meets the quarter panel to help with that fitment as well. But I'm feeling much better about it today than I was at the end of the last video. I'm like, what's wrong? So let me get this out of the way. I'm going to actually clamp the roof down so that it can't move, and then I'll work on the rain gutters. So up here, I was trying to put some more curve into this piece because it doesn't have enough curve to match the shape of the roof. And I was able to get it pretty close. I mean, it's not going to stretch. This has that flange in there, and any curve it's going to be difficult to get. I actually had used my stand. I pushed it down on my stand to try to get a better curve in there. So at this point, you saw that I cut that back corner and I cut this front corner here, and that has allowed the metal to basically relax a little bit. Had I had maybe a stretcher that I could put it in and stretch that metal, it might have changed it, helped it a little bit. But at this point, right now, this is looking pretty good. Now the gutter's going to be a bit wide. Nothing I can do about that. It's how they're made, and it'll be fine. It's not going to change anything. It'll be just as good with a little bit more width than it was, originally. And even parts of the other car that I started with, sections of that are pretty wide as well. So not a big concern. And what I want to do here is I've got to make sure I've got everything where I want it. I need to put some marks so that everything stays in place. I may even put some set screws in here just to hold it. And I've got to, as I mentioned before, I talked about this not aligning with that. So I still have to notch this out, and more than likely I'll be trimming this off as I demonstrated with the actual stainless piece that goes on top of there. So overall, I mean, I can bring that in just a little bit more up at the top, but with this edge up against the inside as it's intended, there's really not much else I can do at this point. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'll continue to work on it a little more. You can see here this corner is actually hitting that piece right now, so I'll trim off some of that. That gap opened up and allowed this metal to compress up in there. Same way here, allowed the metal to push up and get into that radius. So I'll continue to adjust, and then I will probably put some screws in that to hold it in place and do some more testing. So I have done a little more tuning, took a little bit of metal right here off of this flange and a little bit up at the top section. I just want to show you this. All of this is curved, right? So the roof has a curve, the Jerpro has a curve, and the trim has a curve as well. Maybe not quite as pronounced. It's a little flatter in the midsection, but that's going to all be fine because it'll conform to what's here. But I want to show you, if I bring this back and I put it in what feels like the most proper location, I come down here, and as I pointed out previously, this is too long. This definitely is going to have to get cut off and shortened up to make it work with this piece of trim. But I also want to show you, and I'm going to take it to the front and show you that as well. So without really changing anything, if I can get the camera to assist here. So I'll reset this back section, same spot, hold it in place, and come forward. And now you can see, I'm not going to pull it down just yet, hopefully you can see, this sticks past, on this one, maybe ½ an inch. So it's actually a little bit long on this end. Now had they maybe formed this so the curves were further forward, I guess, because you need this to go back, so you'd have to move the curve back. But the problem is, if you move this section back, and I'm going to reset the camera again. So if I move this curve, this back, let's say, and align it more with the front, now this is way past. And I don't feel comfortable trying to bend this. This is already pre-bent. And by the time you force something around here, this angle would change and this would end up being way forward in this plane. So it's simpler to just cut this off. So I will do that, and I want to show you the other side. Not as much room on this side because I have my bench over here, but if I do this, same, repeat the process. And this one isn't, I'm not fully adjusted yet on this back section. But if I just follow the shape of what's here, this is actually long too, just a little. I mean, it's not as pronounced as the other side, but it's a little bit long. So with that in mind, let me show you the front, because I want to make sure you understand where I'm coming from with all this stuff, especially when it comes to this test fitting things. So if I put this one on and get it as close as I can to hooked and make it follow this, this one is actually a little long here based on this curve. So I'll end up trimming a little off of this piece here to compensate for this overhang, because it would probably just fit, but I'm going to make it a little better because you don't want to take that chance of having too much material there. So I may just trim it just a little bit. So anyway, that's where we're at. I'm going to continue to make adjustments. I'll probably end up running screws up into the rain gutter piece. Once I have it locked in, then I can take the roof back off, take the quarters off, and weld the rain gutter in, especially up here on the top section. Down here, I'll punch holes to have it ready for welding, but I need to have it locked in position so that I know exactly where I want everything to be. I now have the rain gutter held in place with screws. I have 2 back here, and I have 1, 2, 3 here on this front section. It's looking really good. I'm very happy with it. However, again, as I test fit the rain gutter trim piece, I realize I'm going to have to trim off maybe another 1/8 of an inch down here at the bottom. The rest of it follows like it should, or like it was intended, but like I said before, you can't change this curve. You can try to bend it, but odds are you're going to kink or do something to damage this curve. So that's what I'm using as my reference point. So just a little more off the bottom here. Now I want to show you what's going on with the other side and what I'm going to do to fix it. And I really want to show you this stuff because, as I said before, if you try to address things later, it'll come back to haunt you. Now, one thing I will notice right off, this curve on the quarter panel and lack of curve on this part of the rain gutter is creating a conflict. So if I'm trying to push this in, it's actually trying to push the top section out, because this does not have the same curve in this location. So part of that is I will remove some material here to reduce the pivot point, right? So this is covered by the trim anyway, so it's not that big a deal. I also had to reshape this flange, move it forward slightly. Even though this is good down here, this section up top was not aligning. Now in the front, as I pointed out before, I cut here to allow this to move up, and I'm going to put another cut here as I did on the other side, so this can flex up as well. You're fighting with metal trying to stretch it, and it just doesn't want to move. Also, if you'll note, this midsection here is making more contact than it is down here, and that is also fighting the movement inboard. You know, as you try to move something or press against something, you can't go anywhere, and so you create a fulcrum, a pivot point. So I'm going to eliminate some of that. I may take a little off of this flange right here just to help it come in, but that's about all I can do at this point. It's coming along, and I think I'm getting very close to having this one set where I need it, and then once I have everything where I'm comfortable with it, I'll take the roof back off, and I can weld, well, I can prep to weld the rain gutters in place, because the screws that I'll eventually put in here will keep it where it's supposed to be. But I'm going to have to, make plug holes anyway where I'm going to weld this. And same way back here and up on top where it meets the inner structure. So I need to get that in place before I can weld the quarter panels on. And there may be some interaction here, like I may not want to weld these just yet because I can still do some things here with the quarter panel. But up here, this has to be welded, and basically this will have to be welded as well because it's not going to be going anywhere. So let me get the rest of this tuned up. Here's what I've come up with for both sides. As I mentioned, I had put these screws in here to hold the drip rail in place, and I had taken this back off and I punched a series of holes on this surface, so this will get welded to the A-pillar. There is also a series of holes up here going into this flange that meets with the top section, and then there are a series of holes over here as well to keep this in place. Now right here I drilled some small holes, and I will be able to weld through those onto the flange for the quarter panel. I do have a small handheld spot weld gun or machine or tool, whatever, but look how that's so snug, I wouldn't be able to get that in there. And by pushing this over, I can catch the edge of that and weld it together, so I'm fine with that. Up here I do have some marks. Now I did not punch any holes in this yet. This area I can probably either use the spot weld gun that I have, or I may end up welding right on the edge and get this solid. If you'll notice, this part of this flange stops and starts over again up here. So the trim is actually going to stick out beyond that, and that'll be fine, because all this is going to get seam sealer in it anyway. And with that, everything is feeling very consistent with the gaps and everything else. This side, as I mentioned, I had a little more trouble with it. I trimmed off a short section here. I trimmed off a short section here. Same thing with the holes. I punched that in. I had to cut a second relief here. This portion of it would not relax. There was no way to get that to go up into that corner. So by cutting that loose, that has relaxed, and now this clamp holds this in place. Same situation over here. If I push this snug, that's a pretty good fit, and it'll be very hard to get tips in there from a weld tool or spot gun tool. This corner, same thing. A little bit of welding in this area should address any issue here. Everything else is fitting good up on top. More plug weld holes, and at this point, the only other thing that I want to demonstrate to you, what I will probably do in the middle here, and when I go to weld this after the roof is removed, is push this up just a little bit, because although this does compress together, you can see a little movement, hopefully you can see that, of this moving, and I can push it up just a hair, and that'll help with some of this. Now, it's not a bad thing, it fits nice, but I'm just trying to compensate anywhere I can. The back section, I will not weld. I may weld this corner, but I'm not going to weld any of this on just yet, because when the quarter is on and off the car, I would not be able to get that flange inside of this. So if I take this apart, or when I take this apart, the roof comes off, I can weld all this front section, get it in place, and probably stop at this point. And I want to be able to take the quarter off, do any more prep work than I need to here, and when I put the quarter back on, because there's a sequence, right? I can't have this welded on, because I would never get that quarter back into that location. With everything loose, I can flex this forward a little bit and then wrap it around this flange. So I'm going to take the roof off again, and then I can weld the top section and the A-pillar section of the rain gutters. So I'm doing these welds using the Yes Welder DP200. I did a video on this welder a few months ago, and I'm really happy with it. I know it has different features. You can do stitch welding, and I haven't tried that yet in this situation because I don't need to. But for doing these plug welds, this thing is fantastic. So I'm using 30 thousandths wire here, and all I'm trying to do is get this rain gutter position. Now earlier on in the video I pushed up on that rain gutter in the center just to give a little bow to it and weld it in. And here I'm just welding the A-pillar section. Always use a clamp to make sure you've got no gap. It should be a nice tight fit. And these welds, again, really easy to weld with this welder. I do like it a lot. So once all this is taken care of, I move on and use the 4.5-inch grinder, and this doesn't take long at all. I know it's in a time lapse, but this, all I'm trying to do is knock down some of the material. I'm not trying to make it totally flush and smooth. It doesn't need to be. On this section, I do want to make sure the welds are about as flush as I can get them. I don't need them perfectly flat, but as I point out in the video later on, the stainless trim that goes up there needs to fit pretty flush. Now, there is the foam seal that goes in there that usually it's that double tape stuff, and that compensates for any variations here, but it pays to make it as smooth as possible and make it look good. Here's a look at what I've done. So now you can see the pattern that I created using my hole punch, and there was an existing hole right there. I just punched a new hole next to it because that hole is a little small and close to the edge. Same way here, there was one right there, and again I punched a hole close to it. I did push up a little bit on this midsection to help with this curve, and I think it's looking pretty good. This forward section, all of these are welded, and I did grind these down almost completely flush because the piece of stainless that's going to go up in here to hold the gasket needs to fit nice and flush. I knocked these down just a little. You know, it doesn't hurt to knock off some of the weld. Just makes it, I don't know, makes me feel better about the welds when I know that there's not a whole bunch of pile up or anything like that. So I still have to address these areas after the quarters are on. So these are going to remain free. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. If you'll look, I put little spots here where I intend to weld this. Now, I've been considering the idea, sitting over here on my bench, is this handheld spot welder. And the tips are kind of wide. And I don't know what I'm going to do just yet. I thought about grinding those tips to make them a little narrower. But what I did on the other car, I punched holes here, and then when I set the roof skin on, I welded up through. And that way I know I've got a really good solid weld. I may just continue with that thought process. I do like the spot welder, but I don't know that it's going to, you know, if it's going to fit, because once this roof panel is on, that rain gutter gets pretty narrow. So at this point, I will probably do one more test fit of the roof. I want to make sure everything's right. And then once I'm done with that, the quarter panels should be welded on next. Everything is ready. All the holes are punched. I don't see any reason why I can't, but I will apply paint, you know, paint and primer, or at least primer, to all of these welds as well, trying to protect what I can while it's exposed. Just a quick look. The roof is back on, and moving that rain gutter up just a tiny bit made a difference. Made a big difference, in my opinion. So at this point, everything is looking good for me to move on to putting the quarters in place. I've got great overlaps. Everything's fitting very nicely. Very happy with the status at this point. So I will take the roof back off and do all the welding for the quarter panels. All right, it's time to start making the quarter panels permanent. As I said before, I painted all this up here, so it's ready to go. everything's locked down. Here we go. Now, what I plan to do here is, I know this is tight here. There's nothing's going to change that. And I can just put some extra clamps down here. That'll move this slightly. So let me just make another adjustment here. Make sure this is tight. And it'll draw this section a little bit tighter on the wheelhouse. Okay, so I can weld these up in this section, but I'm not going to do the front yet because I know I'm going to have to modify the very front section, and I may have to do something with the wheelhouse in that location. So I can weld, you know, half of these or whatever. It's not going to change anything, but I can make these solid and go on from there. Probably what I'm going to do for right now. This panel's getting pretty hot and I don't need to cause any problems. So on this passenger side quarter panel, all I'm doing is pressing down with my thumb on that upper part of the flange, and then I just tacked in some of those welds. I just wanted to make sure it fit as flush as I could get it without, I didn't need any vice grips or anything. I just was pushing it down just using my hand. So I'm coming back and filling in these holes. And you can kind of see in the time lapse that I make like a circle. I try to weld the edge of the hole and then fill in the center section. You can do this a variety of ways. I've done it before where I've started in the middle and worked in a spiral out towards the edge of the hole itself. I've even done it where I've welded starting on an edge and gone back and forth like a zigzag and filled it in. It's not really that critical that you have a specific technique, but you do want to make sure you get that thing filled in. Now, of course, I'll show this later on. I will get out the grinder and knock these down. Here it is. I want to make sure this area is smooth. The gasket goes in there for the back glass, and so you don't want any conflict with that fitment as well. So just take your time and make sure everything looks good when you're done. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. As you saw and I talked about, I have welded up here, welded the perimeter of the vent opening, done some welds down here on the wheelhouse. I welded this bottom section here, more on that in just a minute. On this side, also welded that, and I've welded a few on the inside of the wheelhouse. I did not do the whole thing yet. Welded up here at the vent. And as you saw in my time-lapse sequence, I welded these, and I took the sanding disc, the 4-inch or 4.5-inch grinder with a sanding disc on it, and knocked these down, and also these up here on the inside. Now, I'm going to do a little more tuning before I finish these other welds. This gap, I'm going to try to tighten that up a little bit. It doesn't take much. I mean, seam sealer goes in these anyway. I like this side better, a little bit smaller of a gap. So I'm not ready to put this piece in just yet, but when I do, it's going to get welds up here in this area, and then I'll probably use my spot welder to pinch these together in this back section, and then of course there will be some welds here in these corners. So I'm okay with all of that. The tail panel I did put in place because I wanted to make sure I had my width correct. And before I finish everything, I will adjust as necessary. Like I'll put the deck lid back on or set it in place and make sure I can fit it in. So before I put these corner pieces in and that sort of thing, I want to make sure it's all going to line up. Also, I don't want to attach the tail panel yet because of the roll bar. So over here we have, this is the roll bar that's going into it. And back here on this side I have these 3 pieces of tubing. So these 2 long pieces will go from the hoop, which will go somewhere of course in the middle of the car, and that hoop, that bar has to come back, and basically I'm going to have to cut through somewhere, either cut a hole or notch this or something, because the bar needs to end up back here. And there's a plate that welds here, and so that bar has to translate or transfer the forces to the back section. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. So I don't want to put the tail panel in yet because I need to address that. But also I wanted to point out this is the rear valance. Now this has the cutouts for it, for the dual exhaust cutouts, GT or whatever, and that is a dynacorn piece. So when you're fitting this in, and I didn't demonstrate this earlier, you want to make sure that it's going to fit here. Now I've had issues with other cars that I've done to where something was off, and I had to either modify the rear valance or I had to tweak this section right here. And I've demonstrated that in other cars. I think back in either the Mystique video or the Brooklyn Pony videos, I don't remember. I had to do something here. Now this, I did test fit that, and I'm going to show you how that fits in just a second. And it's very, very uniform, or at least appears to be very uniform in this section. But what you'll also run into is this portion. A lot of times this is long and it interferes with that fitment. So I've trimmed off, there's a piece of leftover material. I've already trimmed this down to do the demonstration. This side I have not trimmed down just yet, but you can see you can have some excess material depending on the stamping. And make sure that fits. If you need to, you can adjust here slightly to get this dimension from there to there better fitting. So I'll put that on and show it to you. But for the most part, that's as far as I'm going to get, at least at this point. So let me put the rear valance on the car and just hang it loosely and show you how that looks. And here it is. Now, I used the existing hole that's already punched into the back section. So the silver part already has holes in it, and the tail panel also has holes in it. Now they're very close to lining up. Sometimes they're a little bit off. This lines up pretty well with where the license plate would go. But I want to show you this. If I push this up, and it's going to take a little, finessing. It's not 100% perfect, but these are not stamped totally correct anyway. I can bend this a little more, and that's going to help tuck that up. But these also have the little bracket in here that attaches through this hole that's in the bottom of the quarter panel. And you can see, as I was saying earlier, like right now it's actually hitting on that inner part. So I need to trim that down, because there you can see the pivot point, right? So trim that down, and that's going to help get this to fit a little more snug and look really good. So no complaints there. Come over to the other side, and very similar. This is the side I've already trimmed, so the gap is really nice. Very happy with that. No complaints. So I'm looking forward to getting more done, obviously, but I'm very happy with the progress at this point. The roll bar will be a challenge, just making sure it's in the right spot, because you have to account for where the seats go, and I may have to play around with it a little bit. I'm going to do some research and see what's the best location. On the 69 cars, they have a window here, and so it kind of sits and blocks the window. I have that one actually sitting up there in the 69. If you can see it or not. I have that one loosely bolted in, and it does block part of that window. That's the Mustang Sheet version of the roll bar. This roll bar doesn't have any attachments, like there's no upper mount points, so it's a little bit different. But I'll have to do some research to make sure I get it in a good location, because the idea being with a roll bar, of course, is to protect the occupant should it roll over. But also the seat, there's a crossbar that goes behind the seat, and that's intended to keep the driver from going back if there's an impact or something from the rear. But anyway, that's going to be the next, should be the next step in the process. I've already shown you that the roof fits very well, and I'm not going to worry about putting it back on at this point because, again, I want to be able to reach through the roof and do some welding on that roll bar. So we've come to the end of another episode. I try to demonstrate everything I can on these builds. I know a lot of people, they will put stuff together and just tell you, yeah, it just do this, do that, and they don't demonstrate it. Really critical about these rain gutters or drip rails, whatever you want to call them. They index the roof specifically as a height. And if you start fighting with all of that, you're going to end up with all kinds of problems. That's why I take my time and I test fit as many pieces as I can to know that I'm in the right spot or within a relative, measurement of being in the exact right spot. So keep that in mind when you're doing these builds. Pay attention, measure, and test fit. So, at the end of my videos, I give a shout out to my patrons. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I try to show them as much appreciation as I can because they're the ones that help me keep making these videos. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there's a link in the description below. There's also links to any products that I endorse or offer, from Amazon to the Yes Welder DP200 that I used for this whole video. I should point out I used 30 thousandths wire on all of it, and it just ran beautifully. So if you're looking for one of those, check those out as well. And there's also a tip jar if you feel like just donating to the cause. There's a link to a PayPal account that you can throw some money my way if you feel like it, but no pressure. So once again, thanks for watching. If you would, leave a thumbs up and a comment. And until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. Maybe I should put the roof on, or maybe not.